There he is.
I can sit here playing on my slightly munged Rubik's Cube.
There, the link made me a participant, so I had to raise my hand.
Sorry about that. Glad you did. Hopefully your camera will work too.
Rubik's Cube.
There it is.
There it is.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. It is 4 o'clock Pacific time on the 11th of February, 2021. And while we're talking, the team is releasing our beta 27, which is significantly better at syncing, staying in sync. For everyone who already has that question, no, the plotter didn't change. It's the same plotter from 26. And what we're going to do is take questions about the business white paper, obviously things that are related. So that's a pretty broad field, but let's try to keep it toward certainly Chia. And what we're going to do is take questions both in the Q&A here on Zoom, and we'll be looking at the Keybase chats. Probably testnet, I think, is going to be the best place to run all those questions through. Let's see. So it looks like people are still coming in. Mitch, it's probably worth you introducing yourself. I think it's the first time you've actually been on one of these.
Great. Would love to. I see the participant number shooting up, so I think people are logging in right now.
Yeah.
Mitch Edwards, the CFO and General Counsel of Chia, worked with Bram a decade ago at BitTorrent as he was changing the world, inventing peer-to-peer computing and distributed computing. And I have been CFO and GC of 5 companies that I've taken public. And part of the plan that we have with Chia is down the road after launch to look very closely at doing the same thing, doing a registered offering or going public and becoming a registered company. And so I think that my past, having taken tech companies, Razer Gaming, Skull Candy, Overstock.com, VFC Tech, Groxus, some other companies, public, will come in and be quite useful when we hit that point. Started out my career as a lawyer on Wall Street with a big M&A law firm. And part of the challenge that we face in the space that we're in is this kind of overlay of ambiguous regulatory regimes that impact us. And so trying to decipher, the right way through this is, I think, part of an element of success for those companies that make it through. I think crypto companies, blockchain companies that disregard that regulatory regime find themselves in trouble, as we're seeing in the news pretty frequently. So we're trying to be the smart people on the block, do it the right way so that the genius of Chia can actually flourish and change the world.
Great. So question from the crowd. Can you give us more details on how you plan to use the strategic reserve prior to the IPO? There's a bit of sticker shock for some on the size. So to answer the first part is we're probably not going to do anything with the strategic reserve prior to getting an IPO or whatever equivalent we do. We would like to make sure that we have actively embraced the SEC and chosen a path that they think is comfortable for them. And then we want to kind of answer that question about exactly how we can use the coins once we're a public company, because it's just a very different conversation with the SEC once you're a filed and reporting company. I understand the thought that it's quote sticker shock. I don't necessarily see it as much. I certainly think it's different than what other people have done before, but no one's done this attempt to have a supporting company that's kind of immediately capitalized. And it's important to know the company's valuation is going to follow the coin price and not vice versa. I think a lot of folks have a sense that somehow the stock market will set the coin price. I think it's going to work almost exactly the opposite way. And, with farmers being the only people who get coins in hand, other than some of the lending we'll do, you guys are going to be the ones who set the price. It's going to be how hard do you hodl?
Yeah, in particular, worth re-emphasizing, we're not selling, we're not dumping. We're not doing that.
Yep. The other question here is there are a ton of questions in Keybase about the strategic reserve, clearly a large vision for Chia. How do you set expectations on long term? It's not easy. And the reason I say that is that the upside is extremely high and could be very high, but I also don't want to sit here telling you that like there's a guarantee it works at all. But the opportunity to disintermediate and accelerate things like Swift, things like how you make all international payments, how equity exchanges work is just a huge, huge opportunity. And taking a lot of the cost of those things out, we think is just going to be, well, it's almost boundless in how big it can be. That said, when, how will it be valued? Will there be another crypto winner? Because Bitcoin is the thing that always is going to fail until it doesn't fail again the next time. It's a bit more difficult to estimate. As to what we're going to do with the farm, assuming that we get to a place where we can use coins, that's where we want to be able to use those things to reward developers as investment in them, as direct payment in some cases. We want to be able to also use the corporate form because, again, assuming that we can get registered and that the regulatory clearances are there, the shareholder structure is a great way to be able to measuredly distribute coins to shareholders in a pari passu basis. So, owning our equity is in a sense owning a claim on those coins. And ultimately, long term, we kind of expect to put those coins in shareholders' hands over time. Let's see. Question was asked about, do I have to be an accredited investor to get in a private sale? Well, unfortunately, yes. And we don't really have a private sale open. We've never ICO'd. We do not sell coins. We've taken equity investment from well-known institutions. We want to be able to let in people who aren't accredited investors involved. And that's why we think that the public company strategy is the right way, because once we do complete the transparency process that is becoming effective with the SEC, then everybody can buy it, and they can buy it in E-Trade or Robinhood or wherever. And that's very much what we want to do. Also, we don't necessarily know for sure which path we'll take to get public. We could do a direct listing. We could do a traditional IPO style IPO. We could merge with a SPAC. There's a lot of different things there. In a couple of those situations, though, we can do some things to make sure our farmers or early farmers can get allocations and get the opening price, if you will. And that's definitely something that we'd like to do. We can't promise we can do it, but it's definitely something Bram and I have for a long time wanted to make sure we could do.
And worth reiterating, there's no requirement that you be an accredited investor or, in fact, even human to farm. Whatever sort of entity you are, you can farm, go for it.
Yep. It's your disk space. You're doing what you want with it. We're glad to have you. But, if you got something else you need to do with it, that's cool too. Somebody's asking, I've read the green paper. It's very technical. Can you kind of explain in simple terms what's so valuable about Chia?
Yeah, so the green paper is very technical. We actually have a new consensus algorithm out that basically supersedes the green paper. That's more complex and sophisticated and even more technical. However, at a high level, the main thing we're doing is making proofs of space work. Right, the space is something that the world has over provisioned in mass quantities. It would be really nice if instead of burning electricity to secure a blockchain, you leveraged this over provisioned resource in order to secure a blockchain. And the technical minutiae are about how to make that happen. It turns out you need to have proofs of time and time lords thrown into the mix and a whole bunch of other stuff. But the short of it is we've got it working. And all you need to know is that there's this process of plotting. And when you've plotted, you can farm using your plots. That's all you really need to know.
Bram, we also should probably talk a little bit about the utility of Chialisp and how that's going to open up a whole new set of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's hard for me to talk about this without getting really deep in the technical weeds, but in terms of our on-chain programming environment, you have Bitcoin script, which is intentionally extremely limited in terms of what it can do. In particular, it doesn't support covenants. So there are things that you might like to do that you can't. So things like having a rate limited wallet, right? That can only spend at a certain rate. But if your wallet gets stolen, you can say, oh no, my wallet got stolen, and then go get your key that's in cold storage and recover the funds. And you're only out the amount that was spent during that time window until you noticed, right? There are things like supporting colored coins on chain, right? That's not supported by Bitcoin script. Now, Ethereum supports this stuff with Solidity, but Solidity wasn't like designed for blockchain programming per se. It was like, well, let's just throw a bunch of mud at a wall. Let's make a knockoff of JavaScript. And hey, it's Turing complete. It can do anything. Let's use that. And due to the generality of general purpose computing, it can do lots of stuff, but it's not a good tool for the job. In particular, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to audit in a reasonable way. There have been many, many real-world disastrous security failures due to bugs in Solidity programs, and Solidity and even the EVM underneath it are not environments that are terribly conducive to writing secure, audited software. And on top of that, when you do something like, say, have a colored coin in Solidity, it then doesn't really interoperate with anything else. Like your colored coin is really just its own thing that's keeping track of entries, and you can't have smart contracts in your colored coin language. The colored coin is completely hobbled in terms of functionality for scripting it. So we have a bunch of really interesting technical tricks which we came up with, which fix these problems, which keep a system that's basically as simple as Bitcoin script, but is a real programming language, which you can write like real functionality, including colored coins and auditable colored coins and interoperable things where you can write even like a rate limited wallet in your colored coin, things like that in it. And this is all done in a way which is very, very conducive towards interoperation between everything and your programs being auditable and reliable, just due to the general patterns that you're using. And not only does it do that, but we have these other things, like it allows non-interactive aggregation of transactions. So you can have, if you can make like an offer to the world where you say want to trade a certain amount of Chia for a certain amount of a colored coin, right? And you make something that's not a valid transaction. It's a partial transaction. You make this transaction that just burns Chia, just goes into the ether, and it prints a certain amount of colored coin. So this is not a valid transaction, but it's an offer. And the way we have it written, it's actually possible for anyone out there. You can take this and post it on, I don't know, 4chan or something. And then anyone out there can go take this offer and pick up the other side of it. And accept the offer by making their own thing, which then prints a bunch of Chia and burns a bunch of the colored coin in such a way that both of them net out to 0. And they can then post this to the blockchain, and it will go through with no further interaction from the person who wrote the original offer. So this is a really, really good approach to doing price discovery in truly distributed clearance. So those are some high-level points of our on-chain programming environment that we think is a huge advance in the state of the art for such things. We've also implemented other things like distributed identity wallets, and those having the ability to grant permissions and revoke them, and doing this all in a way that any other smart coin can like read those permissions and require them and interact with them on the blockchain.
Yep. So I'm going to take two questions and kind of merge them. I think there's a question of, there's a trend toward using stable coins in Asia, and, how would we kind of compete with that? And I'll start on the answer on that one, in that we agree that that stable coins are going to be, one of the very useful tools that ride on top of blockchains. What I'd say, though, is I think that to date, most of the other alternatives just don't have the kind of technical ease or the ease of use overall, to make those stable coins be able to do the kind of neat stuff we're talking about. A stable coin on Chia can have literally all the custody and controls. It can have things like slow paper wallet or rate limited wallets. That's one of the neat things about the way we do color coins. Ram?
Oh yeah, we think Chia would be a great platform for putting stable coins on, because you get all the scripting functionality. It means you could actually have smart coins of your stable coin, and you can do direct transactions on chain, trading your stable coin for Chia, like straightforwardly. So we should be a very, very good platform for stable coins. It's part of our ecosystem.
Okay. Will Chia be EVM compatible or be able to traverse other tokens, ERC20, 721, and between it and other tokens?
So like I said, we will support colored coins. They don't even vaguely look like ERC20 because they're interoperable. That when you're interacting with a colored coin, it's an actual coin. Like, in Unix, everything is a file. In Chia, everything is a coin. And they can all interact with each other regardless of the smart functionality that they already have. Our underlying language CLVM doesn't even vaguely look like the EVM. In particular, the persistent state, which Ethereum keeps, is this like very rich state and is an unending source of problems. The only state that you have in Chia is the coin set, basically what's called the UTXO set in Bitcoin. And although Chialisp supports Turing complete computation, it's very ephemeral. Everything that happens just results in some coins getting spent and some coins getting created, and that's the end of that. Now, as far as interoperation between cryptocurrencies, that all basically boils down to secure hash pre-image reveals. Turns out you can pull off some tricks doing that, including like atomic swaps, but there are other things you can do with that as well. A bit of a technical note, there's very, very little reason to ever do an atomic swap like within Chia per se. A lot of the places you would do that, because we have real covenants, it's just much more convenient and reasonable to use a real covenant. If you want it for privacy reasons, there are times and places it could be used, but definitely if you're looking for interoperation across chains, it's all about that trick of doing secure hash pre-image reveals. And there's a lot more work that could be done on how to implement fancy stuff with that. Although, of course, it would be much, much easier to interoperate with another blockchain that also uses the CLVM rather than the EVM.
So assuming we succeed wildly, isn't it a little scary to have so much value locked up in a for-profit corporation? A couple of different points about that. First of all, in many ways, about the only thing that is safe to have a bunch of value in is a public company running by what are the shareholder best practices. And we plan to adopt exactly those. Majority outside board, annual board of director elections. The shareholders are going to be able to, change the bylaws just like shareholders can. And, what we expect over time is for our shareholder base to get quite wide. But also, we, over the long term, don't necessarily want to have all the Chia sitting on our balance sheet either. And that's what's great about the public company form, is we can actually use it to distribute the Chia either, in waves or slowly but surely quarterly. You know, there's a lot of different tools we can use to get Chia out of the company and into circulation, but in a measured manner, right? It's, you know, not something that like we think we should be getting a lot of Chia out there anytime soon, but a year from now, maybe a very different story, depending on, you know, what's the market look like, how deep is it, you know, what's the deployment look like. Those are the kind of factors we think about when we think about doing that. Other questions somewhat related. Hey, what happens if you guys get bought? Obviously, because it's a public company, you can't say necessarily no to doing the best thing in the shareholders' interest, but you are doing the best thing in the shareholders' interest. And, you know, we're going to be very careful with what those shareholder interests are, because the company's view is very aligned with the mass adoption of Chia. So whatever continues to create that mass adoption and creates the trust that drives that mass adoption is what the company's going to do. Let's see. How long will it be till I see dapps on the Chia network?
Well, it depends what you count as a dapp and how long it takes for people to implement them. In terms of things that we've already implemented, we've already made colored coins. Our examples obviously aren't backed by anything. We're not doing official issuance of anything with them, but that is a thing that works. We've also already implemented DIDs and permission granting, so that's another thing that works. Distributed exchange doesn't exactly look like a DApp. It looks like an exchange, sort of. If you think one of our high priority things to work on once we have launched and transactions are happening is getting our pooling protocol done. That involves some smarts on chain because we're sticking with the everything is a coin approach for that one and haven't implemented it yet. If you're talking about like things like, say, Uniswap, there are a number of DeFi projects that are a little on the sketchy side. Let's just say Uniswap, because that one's not terribly sketchy. I've thought quite a bit about how you could do Uniswap on top of Chia. It's a bit of a rabbit hole of functionality. It turns out Uniswap really does two things. It provides liquidity and it does bookmaking. Because we have real just off-chain matching in Chia, there's no need for it to do bookmaking. It's providing of liquidity definitely can be done. It winds up being that you would implement it in a very, very different way. So it's a very instructive exercise to go through of figuring out how you would, in fact, create Uniswap, because it turns out the Uniswap smart coins are like these two coins, one of which is, say, Chia and vanilla Chia, and the other of which is the colored coin that it's pairing with. And they move around as a pair together. And it turns out the best way to do it is it issues its own colored coin that it uses internally. So that when you have deposits in your Uniswap contract, those are just a colored coin that you can do things with and custody yourself as well. And that makes it so that the Uniswap contract doesn't need to keep track of everyone's deposits, which really simplifies things a lot. And then the actual Uniswap logic is basically someone's trying to put through a transaction which results in like a certain amount of Chia getting printed or destroyed, a certain amount of the paired colored coin getting printed or destroyed, and a certain amount of the internal use token to within the Uniswap colored coin getting printed or destroyed. And the real business logic is just, is this good given the current balances that it thinks it has of everything? And that's where the real business logic comes in, and that's really not my thing. I'm just more figuring out how you would architect this. I really need to do a post about this. I first need to do a post about just how like Taproot and Graphroot work within Chia. just as a real technical introduction to those things. I think the way we've done things, it turns out Taproot and Grafter are much nicer. The Chia implementations really get to the heart of what these things really are. But I have a draft post about that I need to post. After that, I'm going to put together a post about how you would do Uniswap in Chia. I don't think it will be long before that gets implemented because it is entirely doable, and it's not really much more complicated than stuff we've built already. And in fact, most of the hard stuff is just how do you have colored coins which we've already done. And so that could leverage that existing work. So probably not long, but definitely we do. There's a process of creating an ecosystem of developers who understand how to work in this environment. So some of the Chia employees know how to do it pretty well right now. And we have some documentation on it, but we really look forward to building up the ecosystem and want to encourage people to build these sorts of things.
Yeah. And just a note on all that, we've been very focused on getting the core blockchain and the core pieces of Chialisp together. And then that focus is now getting to shift to bringing in developers, training developers, and getting them comfortable with the platform.
Yeah, to the extent that we've written smart coins already, it's to validate our approach to writing smart coins. So because we've actually done these pretty non-trivial things already and have what I believe are pretty elegant implementations of them, that gives us good confidence that our approach really is a good one and that people will be encountering a mature system when they start developing for it, unlike, say, the EVM.
Mitch, how is your business model different than a relatively well-known blockchain that's been under some stress from the SEC recently? Aren't you also selling coins, is the question?
I see a couple of questions that I'll merge into that one. We are radically different than Ripple and XRP. We have no intention of selling Chia. And to the extent that people want to participate in this, grand adventure, world-changing adventure, they need to buy stock in the company. And let me riff a bit on how we're doing that very differently than other blockchain and digital currency companies. As Gene said at the beginning, our intention is to, after we launch at some point, depending upon a multitude of factors, market conditions and regulatory regime and who ends up as chair of the SEC and a bunch of things, our intention is to register with the SEC as a 1934 Act reporting company. That means the world changes. When you're a public company, by law, we now have disclosure obligations that most companies, indeed all but a few companies that you can count on one hand, will have the obligation to every quarter share complete, full financial information. If there's any material development between quarterly reports, we have to file 8Ks and do current reports. We cannot disclose material information to some shareholders, but not to all or to the public. So to the extent that we inadvertently, or an employee or an executive inadvertently shares some inside information or some material event with anybody, we have to immediately file what's called a Form FD with the SEC and disclose that to the world so that everybody's on the same playing field. That means we are now custodians of the strategic reserve of the equity in the company that people have bought, and it is transparent on a daily basis to the world, not only investors, but observers. And we think that will keep us honest if the executives want to stay out of jail. Our intention from day one is to go through the front door of the SEC and of the regulators and comply. Companies like Ripple, whether it was bad advice or it was just over aggressiveness, raised capital in a period where there was some ambiguity, but they sold XRP. They literally sold it for cash and it filled their coffers. We will never do that. that is the reason they are under investigation right now, and why they're back and forth with the SEC. And unclear what the result will be, but there are scenarios where it's going to be very unfortunate, like rescission, having to give money back to investors, because we're kind of starting with the end in mind and going down the correct regulatory regime and becoming a compliant 34 Act company. We think we'll avoid all of those missteps, and we'll be in a class of 1 or 2 in the entire digital currency world, where we will be transparent, public. Everything we do it'll be open source, and there will be no secrets. And that is exactly what the SEC wants when it is trying to keep companies honest and protect investors.
Mitch, there's a lot of questions that are. Oh, Bram, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. Also, important point to add: the legal ramifications of this aren't super clear. But an important point is the Chia blockchain is in fact fully decentralized. No nudge, nudge, wink, wink. No, oh, there's a lot of validators, so it's fully decentralized. No. It's actually a Nakamoto consensus in very much the same way that Bitcoin Nakamoto consensus. It's over an even more distributed set of resources. We think that the number of entities that would have to band together to do a 51% attack is going to be much, much larger, like orders of magnitude larger than it is in Bitcoin, just as a matter of practice. We, the company, are not going to be doing any farming at all. And this is all like above board. We're being clear on this. We're not going to be doing like hard forks ever, much less routinely. Any soft forks we do will be through a community process where they only go in when there's broad consensus that this is a good idea. Yeah, we are not lying to the public about being decentralized here.
And that is you've actually hit the legal position of the SEC right now. Commissioner Hinman made a speech, and it's called the Hinman test. And the reason that the SEC overtly came out and said that Bitcoin and Ether are not securities is the very point Bram just made. They are sufficiently decentralized. There's no one in control anymore. There's no one company, there's no one person, there's no founder that can sit there and pull the levers once it's out there. There's no company running Bitcoin. That sufficient decentralization is critical in our business plan and enables us to stand before the SEC and say, we're not going to manipulate this. We can't. We're not farming. We're not the only ones writing the software. There has to be consensus in this decentralized network, and we are no longer in control, which is candidly one of the reasons I think it's taking longer to get launched than a lot of us would have wanted to. We want to make sure that it is ready to go, because once it is released, once it's live, once it's launched, hard for us to just kind of rewrite the thing again. It's got to be right.
We cannot.
Right.
Also, not everyone's been around in the community as long as we all have. We've already seen this happen once. We had a plan for how we were going to do pooling, and a lot of our community members came and said, hey, look, here are the reasons why we think pooling should be able to be done a different way. And, they were right. And what we've done is made changes to their plans on how pools work. That's exactly the kind of, broad consensus, understanding the problems, and kind of moving the software forward for everybody, for your farmers, for people writing dapps, for people trying to deploy enterprise implementations. This is what we're up to. And I think there's an important point when people are thinking about the pre-farm. A lot of people have thought about these pre-mines in the context of proof of stake. This is not us. The pre-farm here is only something that could cause price movement. And so when you're talking about it, you're only talking about potentially price. And what we're saying here is that certainly until we're past the SEC, we're not selling coins. And so it's not going to be something where we have much to do with the price at all. In fact, nothing other than maybe reputation. Mitch, a bunch of questions are very, hey, when's the IPO going to be? Obviously, we can't predict it, but can you give a sense of what those factors are and kind of what we what we hope for, what's maybe likely, with the caveat that, we're all predicting the future and it may not work out that way.
Right. Having done a number of IPOs as CFO and having done dozens and dozens as a lawyer in my first career, IPOs are really not successful. IPOs aren't totally driven by the company. They are largely driven, timing of them, by macro and exogenous factors. You don't say, I want to go public this summer. And sometimes you hear an entrepreneur say, I'm gonna go public next year. That they haven't either been well advised or have never been through the process before. You can have windows where you target, but our goal is to, one, not go public to raise needed capital. We will be sufficiently capitalized that won't be the reason we're doing an IPO. Companies who go public to raise money because they're running out of money face a bargaining position with the market and they're on the wrong side of it, and they get taken advantage of. We will be sufficiently capitalized that will not be the reason we do it. When we go public, we will look at macro factors, health of the digital currency market. Right now, for example, where we launched would actually be a great time to do an IPO, with the price of all the major digital currencies trading very high, a lot of demand, with new interest by institutions. The very institutions who participate in most IPOs, the fact that they are now showing great interest in digital currency and buying it, the fact that institutions, 200-year-old institutions like Mellon Bank in New York, that is as old and stodgy a financial institution that's almost like the bankers in the Harry Potter movie. It's what they are now allowing their customers, and they will custody digital currency for them. So periods like right now would be great. If it cools off, which it could say we will wait 3 months, 6 months. I think our target is going to be the 3 to 12 months after we launch, and but we'll be very attuned to global economic conditions, demand by institutions for an IPO, macro, and then the health of the industry itself in which we sit, because there's, whether we like it or not, whether we like other approaches to digital currency or not, we all are kind of lumped together when you come to public markets. And a lot of interest and buoyancy in digital currency markets would be very helpful with respect to our timing. So possibly this next summer, possibly next fall. Hard to predict until we actually get there.
Great. A couple quick questions that I just want to handle because they're relevant to the paper. Some people were asking, how much of the pre-farm would it be if the safe investors redeemed? And the answer is $5 million worth of Chia at the time. So can't predict exactly what it is. Expect it to be a pretty small part of the Chia pre-farm. And the goal of that is to instead get it converted and get it public, not to actually go forward with that penalty. That's the point of the penalty. Let's see. There's a lot of questions about, I think, not really asking when mainnet, and everyone warns you that when you ask when mainnet, it moves out a week. That's going to stop, I think. And when are the tokens going to be available for purchase? We don't really control the timing of when the digital money exchanges will list us. We've obviously been name checked by both Bitstamp and Coinbase on their public blogs as being on a short list of folks they're interested in. There is some technical lift for them because BLS signatures is new. It is, however, a component of Ethereum 2 and Filecoin and others. So it's something that they're going to have to do. But I think we're going to be the driver for them to do that integration. Obviously can't comment on exactly what we know on the backside of that because we need to let them have their process respected as far as how they'll list coins. But we fully expect quite a few exchanges will list us, and we expect the exchanges we've never talked to list us. And for those who were late, there was a couple questions around, hey, can we buy into that IPO we're offering? Just to recap, the goal is yes, but the different methods may mean we may or may not be able to. But we would like it that especially early farmers who farm before, say, some subblock X, have the ability to buy at the offer. Let's see. Bram, what happens if somebody takes our open source and forks it and uses space and time on some other chain?
First off, we own the Chia trademark. So if people start doing things that would do the Chia trademark, we're going to go after them for that. But we believe we have, community and momentum built up so that people will, go with what we have. I think the world is a little tired of people doing like Me Too knockoffs with their own pre-farm silliness. However, in terms of existing coins that are out there and what they do for their consensus, I think in the long term, once we've proven that it works, a lot of the coins that do think doing hard forks is no big deal and are running into issues with both proof of work and proof of stake are probably going to start switching over to proof of space and time.
Yeah. And, to be clear, we want that to happen. We're excited about helping proof of stake have less problems and not burning as much electricity per unit of security. And we will be supporting co-farming in our software to make it easy for people to be able to be on the, main chain's total net space size.
We'd have to, I don't know how we could stop it. It's gonna.
But let's say we're not even going to try to stop it. We're going to try to enable it. It's the right answer.
Yeah.
And look, I think people ask, well, doesn't that mean that like we're somehow going to be uncompetitive against those? I think ultimately people will want to go to the source of these new technologies, and it's a whole package. It's partially even the network effects of Metcalfe's law, right? Like, once you sort of get this ball rolling, you kind of want to be using the state of the art version that everybody else is using. And, Bitcoin shows you that's, kind of the big animal. We aren't necessarily trying to go get Bitcoin. We're trying to go create a programmable money environment that's actually secure and easier to use.
To get past network effects, you really have to be dramatically better. It has happened. Like, before Facebook, there was MySpace. Before MySpace, there was Friendster. Network effects are overcome, but you do need to be dramatically better. And we are like dramatically better than the cryptocurrencies that are out there currently, after having done a ground up rewrite with some really, really new technologies. Not anticipating anyone being dramatically better than us pretty much ever. But we're going to, continue ongoing development to keep things that way.
Great. So Bram, how many employees do we have? I'll tell you the answer. It's 21 in the white paper. And is there a desire to run a large company?
No, there's no desire to run a large company. Everything I've read that's serious about management basically says as companies get bigger, they just get problems and nobody knows how to fix them. Even other companies that are run by techies who also know this, who take it really, really seriously, probably do better than most big companies do, but run into the same problems. And to the extent that they have defenses, it's more because it's like the founders are still there and still have some real sway than much of anything else. We might we intend to stay focused on our core thing and build up an ecosystem around it and not do everything ourselves. I think the currency is much more robust when we do that anyway. If we accidentally wind up having a whole bunch of other sideline businesses, probably are going to try and keep those a little bit isolated and possibly even sell off or spin them out afterwards.
Yeah, and I want to echo this. I mean, we believe that a Red Hat style business needs to exist to hold people's hands as they finally start doing this for real. But if that business gets to the size we expect it to, honestly, we want to like find it ahead and spin it out to the shareholders. So instead of having one Chia share, you have a share of Chia and a share of Chia, the enterprise software development company. And we also want to do that because longer term, we kind of expect folks that do things like general ledger software, so Oracle and NetSuite and the big four accounting firms will be places you turn to help integrate Chia into your accounting and use. And we don't necessarily want to compete directly with them in any way. So, the long-term view is that we're going to, in some ways, build a couple businesses, but those businesses are likely to get spun out to the shareholders and kind of track and trade differently as we kind of grow. Let's see. When do you start activities to drive revenue and eventually profit? Mitch, you want to take the first tap?
Sure. We are putting technology and excellence before profit in the short term. And so the goal is to launch with a great new product and change the world in that it will have features and that existing digital currencies do not have. From that base of excellence, there are a number of business models that we're very excited about. I think they will take some time to roll out as volume on exchanges start to increase and as people gain trust in the trustless nature of Chia. And I think the two businesses that could happen fairly quickly, but I think we'll be very careful about not overextending ourselves, will be lending Chia to the extent that when it is listed on exchanges. Crypto exchanges are becoming much more sophisticated. Market makers are now selling, you can buy futures, you can short, you can do various straddles and instruments. To do all of that, market makers typically, especially if you're on the short side, you have to borrow currency before you're actually selling something you don't own. You have to borrow it so that you can deliver it. If and when you have to make good on that contract. So a robust market leads to the lending of a lot of securities. You often don't even see that that's going on, but it's going on all day and it's a big part of Wall Street. And we intend to use the strategic reserve to just create and provide for a very liquid market on the exchanges. That will involve lending Chia to exchanges, market makers, and indeed individual investors of a certain size so that they can do these different instruments and different strategies on markets and not just buy and hold. And that kind of active liquid market requires the borrowing of the security. We'll lend it, we'll charge interest on it, and I think that will be one of the immediate sources of revenue. As companies, institutions, indeed governments start to see the utility of a new blockchain that has features that are more secure, that are more malleable to controls than other existing currencies, we think that there'll be a red hat business of assisting those businesses implement and operate digital currency in their business or in their industry. And so that would be really a consulting business. But as a CFO, I know that adoption of some new paradigm, you end up hiring, consultants or advisors or someone. And I think that there will be an early opportunity to get in. And although it is open source, Linux was open source and Red Hat sold for $25 billion to IBM based on its consulting business. I think that also will be a big source of revenue in the first year. Down the road, I think there are international payments, transfers, colored coins that Bram mentioned. I think will increasingly, building on the Chia blockchain will give opportunity to sovereigns, to governments, to other institutions to build products and smart contracts on the blockchain. And what we are calling colored coins are tokens that could be built on top of the Chia blockchain. And there is a whole take over the world ecosystem for a superior digital currency that is safe, secure, and completely decentralized.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is in terms of us getting adoption in the world, job one is be a good money, like be good at transfers, be good at custody. And this is very unsexy, right? Like people in the finance world want to hear about how you do investment schemes. But the first thing, the absolute most base level thing that the finance system does is move money from point A to point B. And the traditional banking system, especially in the less developed parts of the world, is not very good at doing that. And something we've spent a fair amount of time on is better custody solutions, like rate limited wallets, things like that. Which don't sound super sexy and exciting, but I think are utterly foundational in terms of making us actually be a better cryptocurrency for people to actually use for the most fundamental things that cryptocurrencies are really better for.
Yep. So I think one of the key questions we continue to kind of get, and so I want to take it pretty head on, is what's the point of farming when the company will still have 50% of all coins even after 21 years? And the farmers will have 42% of all coins in 6 years. It slows down intentionally. And, this isn't a conversation about, I guess, price, but I think that there's some pieces that people won't necessarily see about it. We don't think the company will have 50% of the coins in year 21 because we think that there'll probably have been intervening events where we distributed to the public shareholder base some of the coins. We think that there will be things where we've made investments in other wallet providers and dApp providers, and those coins will be with them. So, we see this more as an asset that we're going to use to have a much less expensive way to raise fiat, because it is much easier in the public markets to raise cash against assets without having to necessarily sell the asset. So as a farmer, instead of us having to sell coins into the market and pushing the price down, we can sell stock into the market, dilute the shareholders, and have more cash to go to market with and develop with. We think that's superior than like mixing in the coin and how we're kind of capitalizing directly the company. And, look, if you think the pre-farm is valuable, you should probably become one of our shareholders. One of my favorite personal rules of thumb is that if I think a product is really great but expensive, I want to own the stock. And that way I basically pay myself back, and I've made myself a bit of money on that with Apple, for example. So we think this is about the best thing we can come up with because a lot of projects look at like the nonprofit version, and I always worry that these nonprofit governance organizations will end up being your homeowners association. And if you've gone to your homeowners association much, you'll know what I'm talking about not everybody sees eye to eye about all this stuff. We like the public company for-profit form because it tells you what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase the shareholder value. That's both the asset value of the company and the revenue and profit.
There are some foundations in cryptocurrency which have had they've had some issues. Putting money into a foundation does not magically make them be great at serving the public.
What about the decentralization of development? Do you think we're going to decentralize more? And how do you feel it will be able to resist government pressure? I can take it if you want. We're already starting to see more decentralization of our development. It gets a little weird because there are people on our development team who are really actually the community. And so it's kind of unclear, like, do they count as decentralized developers because we pay them or not? Don't know. We're definitely seeing more and more pull requests that are of real interesting components of the application, and we think that will only increase. Bram and I've always talked about that, like, Bram's job is to be less important to the future development of Chia than Linux is at this point in Linux. That's definitely our intent, is to make this much more like a Bitcoin project. The difference is, though, is nobody has to go hungry because we do have the assets that the pre-farm and the company create to be able to make sure that people can put food on the table and, spend time building layer 2. As to government pressure, one of the reasons we're in the United States is because the First Amendment gives us some protections. We feel like that as much as Apple has resisted the government changing how they design their software, we can do the same sort of thing here so that we can make the right decision for adoption of global cryptocurrency, not necessarily what short-term government interest might be. We're starting to run low on time. There are more questions we have time to get to, and I apologize about that. We are going to do this again at 10 a.m. Pacific for folks who it's really late in Europe, but some of you are still on. Thank you. people were asking, are we going to speed it up? Beta 27 is only not out completely because I've been sitting here talking to you right now. In the next hour or so, beta 27 will be posted, and it is much faster.
For plotting speed, we did get something I'm very proud of. We sped up plotting a lot, which was a really big technical lift. You know, we did these competitions to improve plotting speed, which didn't really result in much material plotting speed improvement, even after we'd given some hints about how it could be done. But then we managed to pull off substantial improvements ourselves. So I'm very proud of that. It's probably not possible just from a physics standpoint to get more than a factor of 2 improvement in the plotting speeds we have right now. And we're getting into optimizations which have more trade-offs than unambiguous positives. But we think there will be some speed ups in plotting speed, if that's what the question was getting at.
Yep. Let's see. What's your plans to get hype around the launch? Well, we're thinking that giving out 3.3 million Chia over the next 12 months is going to do some good things to getting people to pay attention and be interested in Chia. But I'll also say that we've been seeing a lot of the word of mouth work. We're seeing friends of friends asking friends about Chia, and that's starting to happen. We've intentionally not focused a lot of our heat and light on the farming launch. We wanted farming to get started, get stable, and get going, and are more interested in kind of focusing on the actual first transaction launch, which will be 6 weeks after the farming launch. But also I think you're going to start seeing a lot more conversation in the media about us as soon as tomorrow.
Yeah, we're very focused on really making a good product and having that like sleeper hit word of mouth thing, which comes from good product. We're not that interested in being a bunch of meme lords on Twitter.
Though we do appreciate a good meme.
Yes, yeah. But our focus really is on quality product, and to the extent that you get hype afterwards, it should flow as a natural extension of really having something.
Yep. There's a question that's kind of like, well, won't your public equity price not necessarily track the coins on balance sheet? Mitch, you want to take the first stab and I'll take the second stab? Unfortunately, Mitch, you are muted.
As a public company, we'll have no absolute direct control over our share price other than performance. But think of Chia if you're a gold mining company and you've got a bunch of gold in the ground, that real estate that you own. The value of your public company in general fluctuates with the price of gold, even though you're not selling it, even though you haven't even extracted it yet. The fact that there's potential extraction, potential energy there, potential causes the market to say, the value of this land includes the mineral estate beneath it, and that's gold, and gold's trading at this price. We expect our stock price to correlate roughly with the ups and downs of the price of Chia. To the extent that it doesn't, we can always go into the market and kind of correct that ourselves by using Chia to buy back stock. And so if stock crashes for some reason, people aren't even paying attention to what we do or what our balance sheet looks like, but we're just part of a wave of selling that could happen in a market. We can go back in using Chia, buy shares of stock that are being sold at a depressed price to the point where we bring it back to the level where it reflects some percentage of the strategic reserve. So we have that tool, which a lot of public companies don't have, to actually go in there and repurchase stock if we think that the market is not properly valuing the stock.
Yeah.
Gene, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I did want to add a little. I would say that we don't yet really know exactly what that correlation will be. There are some arguments that we may actually trade at a slight discount because we'll be burning cash, and that's completely legitimate. The cash itself has value, so we're going to be sitting on cash that we would have raised during the offering process. at some point that may flip the other direction and actually be that you're getting the future profits from the software company, and therefore we trade at a premium to our kind of basic, valuation. There are also some conversations we're likely to have with the street and others about, is it rational to discount like the tax cost of us selling the Chia and say that, okay, that has to kind of come off the top because the shareholders can never really realize that. It's a little bit to be determined. But what we think is that, there's a not exact correlation that we'll be comfortable with, and that's okay. If it gets too far out of whack, that's when we have these tools that we can, bring it back closer to, the what we think is a fair valuation, and that's a board decision, and it's gonna be done by a board of directors that would primarily be outside. Chuck Stoops, our first outside director, will be joining us tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for those folks in Europe, or for those folks who want to catch that one tomorrow. So you'll get to meet him, and we have another independent late in the recruiting process, and we hope to have them step across the line here soon, and are still looking to fill that third seat before we get towards our actual offering. I think that because we're at the top of the hour, we're going to wrap it up here. I think we answered most of everything. There are still some not as relevant or other questions. I'll see if we can take some more of those in general. And potentially also, if you've got an additional question we didn't get to tomorrow at 10, will work as well. Any final thoughts, Mr. Cohen?
Thanks everyone for coming on. I'm very pleased with how excited and happy our community feels. Like it's important to me that there's this dark art of community management, and it's very important to me that we have a community that's friendly and supportive of each other. I think too many cryptocurrencies have this we're so cool attitude. The other thing I really want out of our community is really for it to be viewed as we're building the future, we're making something great, not just we're getting rich and anyone who isn't getting rich with us is a fool. I think that's a really toxic attitude to have. And what's really important is building something that creates real value in the world.
That's right. If we do what we want to do the right way, everyone, including everybody in the community, will do quite well economically. That's good. And we can do some real good in making people in countries that don't work like ours have those tools available to them. Mitch, any parting thought?
Green money for a digital world. I think that farmers around the world, I think the way Bram has architected this is really interesting in that I actually was with a big mining company, biggest mining company in North America for a while, that is massive and consumes stunning amounts of electricity. I foresee farmers in third world countries, potentially making, I don't know if it's a living wage, but augmenting something with farming. And they won't be squeezed out by big mining farms. They can participate on a pro rata basis like everybody else. And that's democratizing in a lot of ways, and it feels good. We're not destroying the planet, and we may be lifting up a lot of people who are unbanked and unable to make money in other ways by using a resource that they already have. So
everyone can farm.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen. We'll do this again tomorrow morning, and thank you everyone in the community for your questions, and we'll be on Keybase shortly after. Thanks very much, everybody.